Hey everybody, this is Jose here. We are about to get started. We're starting with 1 minute of delay, more or less, but ready to go, basically. So, quick sound check, if that's okay. How are you, Joe? Good to see you. Yes, we are home. Very good. So, just 1 minute and we begin, everybody. Thank you so much. Very nice. Around 40 seconds plus and ready to go. And 10 seconds to go. Almost there. Wonderful, everybody. We just hit the starting time of the session. So, welcome, everybody. This is the top trading session. My name is Jose Blasco. Today is June 5, 2022. And in the top session, we basically take care of the use of our platform top, the Trading Options Planner, even though often these sessions are quite rich because we often combine trading lectures that may address any subject related to trading and the application of it with the use of the technology built in our platform. Before we get started, I would like to highlight the financial disclaimer on the upper left side of the screen. Please read it carefully. And as you complete reading the disclaimer, so we'll talk about the agenda for today as well, which I kind of said it already. We're going to be looking at the platform top. Often combine our exploration and learning of the use of the platform with trading lectures. And of course, here for you, my friends, any question you may have, ideally related to the subject I'm addressing today. But if you have other questions and we have time, more than happy to discuss it too, or at least, I could certainly think of addressing it in a future session or even create a session for that purpose only, depending on the question. So please, no one is shy, isn't it? So everybody be ready to participate, everybody be ready to be engaged, and let's have a powerful session, everybody. So let's begin. Just closing this as we are getting started as well, and as always, the first thing I'm showing you as we start the session is our questions page. Okay, you can see the URL on the bottom left side of the screen, tradewithufos.com/Jose. This is a page where really the section, which is very interesting here, apart from places where to subscribe and all of this, is the questions page. Okay, is the questions page itself, which is where you could type your questions so you can get answers. But also, if you don't find the answers you're looking for, or your question happens to be very specific, so you can always go ahead and click ask a question, and then what you can do there is you can actually type the information that you are looking for. Let me rephrase that. You can actually type your question, okay? So then we can give you the answers, which is the information you're looking for. Anyway, with all of this said, let's jump into top and let's begin our session today. So here is top, and we have been running a collection of top sessions already since we started with top sessions. We have been talking about the use of the charts. The prior sessions we have been running which were top sessions. We have been spending time talking about the use of the matrix. And the next tool I would like to address is the option chain. Now, having said that, right above the matrix, I kind of skip it because it's quite simple. We got the quote window. And to be honest, the quote window, once you know how to use the quote window, you kind of know how to use the position window. So since it's going to take me very little time, let me, if you don't mind, address quote window and positions window. We can talk about this, and then from there, I'll move into the option chain, which is going to be the most important topic for today, okay? So, quote. So what is a quote sheet window? Well, this is a window where you could input any stock symbol, for example, McDonald's, for example, the SPY ETF, and automatically there are a series of columns that pop up with the real-time information. The beauty of these quote sheets is that you could group that window. For example, if I use blue, which is the same color I have for my chart on the background, and then I click on any of those symbols, so notice how this quote window is also very helpful for me to be able to go through a list of symbols that may be linked to this window. Okay, so let's say, for example, you are analyzing forex currency pairs, for example, and I'm going to use forex just to have a very different example. Okay, so you could use AUR USD, for example, and when you click on it, okay, it's gonna change the chart to the euro, right? Let's say you are looking at futures slash yes for the S&P. So now you can just click on it, and now you can see the futures. Okay. So again, this window is quite interesting in order to create your watch lists, if you wish, no matter if they are futures or stocks or whatever they are. Of course, depending on the version of top that you are running, you may have access to certain data feeds or not, and also the symbols will change. I am currently using, as you can see on the upper left, the Predictive Options Planner for QC, which is connected to the data feed of QuoteStream Connect, and therefore the symbology I'm using for currency starts with a dollar sign, for the future starts with a forward slash sign, where if you were to use the top for TradeStation, so instead of slash ES, it would be at ES, etc. So there will be changes of symbology because, of course, a different data feed has all those implications. But again, the point of this window is that you could just create yourself a list with whatever symbols you follow. And apart from having the visual presentation that we have in front of the screen, where you can see, for example, what is the net movement of that particular market in the last trading day, the bid size, the ask size, and information of that sort, which could be very interesting. Apart from that, it also clickable and therefore serves very well as a very efficient tool for you to go through a collection of markets that you may review every day as part of your trading routine. So again, this could be your watch list. Okay, maybe for example, you have seen in many sessions with Josip. For example, he will look at the SPY, he will look at the DIA, he will look at the QQQ, he will look at the IWM, okay, being those four ETFs that represent the S&P, the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq, as well as the Russell 2000 index. And instead of typing those symbols, you can just go ahead and click. And as you can see, the charts in the background are changing to those particular symbols as I click. Okay, so very useful, kind of like a classical functionality that we find in many platforms. And this is where you find it in the quote sheet window. Now, something which is interesting here, before I get into those columns, is also the fact that in the bottom part, here it says Portfolio 1, you could actually create more portfolios. So Portfolio 2. And now I got two tabs that allow me to move back to my Portfolio 1, okay, and then go back to Portfolio 2. So let's say Portfolio 2 is a section which I use for Forex only. So maybe I got my Aussie dollar, I got my euro, I got my pound. So I can have my currencies here, okay, which I could track and also use it to click and change my background charts. But also, if I'm not looking at currencies anymore, and now what I want to check is I want to go back to my ETFs. So then I'll go back to tab Portfolio 1, and you can have multiple tabs where you basically organize those watch lists in whatever format which is most convenient for you. This particular quote sheet can also obviously be floated. So if I float it and it's outside my main top window, so now I can just put it on the left. I could maybe make it more narrow. So maybe you are working on in using this type of formatting in order to use the real estate space of your screen in a way that is convenient to you. Maybe this is the clickable space on your screen. You can of course also maximize it, and if you want to bring it back into the main window, you just dock it. So I'm just gonna click dock, and it goes back inside the main application window. Another thing which is interesting is that you cannot right click or double click on the portfolio like you would do on a spreadsheet, for example, on Microsoft Excel, for example, to change the name or do changes. You cannot do that, but you could right click anywhere on that particular screen, and you can here rename the portfolio. So here, for example, I could call it ETFs, and when you click OK, so that tab now has changed. Okay, and if I go to the second one and I right click to rename portfolio, so now you can call these currencies. Okay, and now you have your ETFs and your currencies, and now those tabs are even more useful than before because they are actually named based on what's inside. Notice that you could also get rid of those tabs. If I delete that portfolio, that ETF is in brown color, meaning this is the one that is currently selected. So if I delete the portfolio, that ETF tab, as you can see, went away. You can add portfolios from here there too without clicking the plus sign, which would be the same as I said before. Okay, and also something very cool is that you could save whatever you have on the screen as a template. And whatever I have on the screen, I'm not referring to the symbols, I'm referring to the structure. For example, notice how my second column it's wider than the first column. Let's say I right click on the headers and I end up inserting an empty column somewhere in between, or I add a field, for example, let's say the net change as a percentage instead of just the net change. Just move it next to next change as a percentage. By the way, notice how I clicked and hold and dragged. That's how you move things around. So now let's say I want to save that as my default. So I could come to template, save as a default, and now every time I would open a new quote sheet, that column, net percent change, would be available, which by default, it's not. You can also have very, very unique settings where, for example, you came in here and you said, look, I don't want this column. I don't want this column. I don't want this column either. Bid size, ask, and ask size is not interesting to me. Okay, so with all of this said, that's it. I want to save this as my specific template, which I'm going to call save, and I'm going to call this template, simplest view. Okay, so that's maybe one way for you to do it. And therefore, if I open a new portfolio, let's go back to recreate the ETFs. Okay, if I was to recreate the ETFs. Okay, and which, by the way, you just saw me drag it to the left by click and hold and move it to the left. And I was to add SPY, let me do that again, SPY, SPY, DAI, QQQ, IWM. So I'm back to kind of what I had before. So now let's say I want to see this on that other view, which was the simplest. So now I could go to my template, okay, and load. And here I have my simplest view, which is the one I saved before. So when I click open, so notice how those other columns are gone. I'm only left with that particular view I had before, which was saved as a template. Okay, again, it's quite intuitive and self-explanatory almost. Okay, but at the same time, using this tool properly really makes the use of the platform more convenient because you have the things if you work with watch list or clickable lists, so you have them where you want. You have them easily accessible, well sorted, and you have the views that are relevant to you. Okay, so in that sense, it's quite interesting. Other things that are interesting here is the fact that you could format. You have certain options for format, which have to do with the colors. Okay, and I won't get into working too much with this because it's, again, quite self-explanatory. But basically, you can change the header. You can, if the price movement of those markets is going up or down, so you can change the down text, which is red when it's going down or green when it's going up. So all of these things can be changed. Again, it's quite self-explanatory, as well as the size of the font, which obviously if I increase and I click OK, so obviously now everything becomes larger. Okay, again, self-explanatory. Now, something which is interesting, which is less intuitive, is the fact that the second option on the top talks about calculating a P&L based on the midpoint, which means that apart from displaying real-time market data, the quote sheet could also be used to track positions, okay? Which later below here we have a positions tool, so I need to explain the difference between tracking positions using the quote sheet versus using the positions. Okay. But anyway, so notice that I could come in here in size, and when I click size, when I double click on size or entry or PNL, basically this position pop up showed up, where now I have an option here to right click and either select long or short, select a size. For example, let's say I bought 100 shares of SPY, and let's say I bought it when the SPY was trading at 405. Since it's currently trading at 410, obviously this is going to give me some sort of a profit if I click OK. So now you can see here the amount of profit that you are making. You are making $554 if you had been long 100 shares when the S&P was trading at 405. So again, if you input nothing, those columns would be empty. But if you input information about a position, which could be a real position taking with a different platform, or maybe it's just some sort of forward test that you are doing as you are practicing methodologies. So whatever you input here will be displayed real time. But this real time, and I'm right clicking again to P&L based on midpoint, this real time value of the profit or the loss is by default based on the worst case scenario, which is either selling to the bid, which is the worst price to sell, or buying from the ask, which is the worst price to buy from when you buy. Another possibility, which is especially useful for options trading, because for most of the stocks or ETFs, I would think that probably you trade pretty liquid instruments, and therefore the difference between bid and ask is not too great. But when we are dealing with options, many times, yes, those values, the bid and the ask price, are separated by many cents, or sometimes a few dollars. So if you were to select the P&L based on the midpoint, in this case, it won't make too much of a difference. A little bit more than normal if you wish, because the markets are closed at this moment in time. But during market hours, the difference would be 1 cent, 5 cents. Normally is going to be very little depending on the stock or ETF you trade. But again, with the options, this is often going to help you to have a much better view, because what happens many times is that some option strikes may not be too liquid or may be far out. And if that's the case, what happens is that you had no trading happening in that strike level, and therefore you have a pretty wide spread between the bid and the ask, and therefore, because it's plotting you by definition the worst prices at which to get in or get out, so then the P&Ls that you get here look pretty bad. So by using the P&L based on the midpoint, which is an option, as you can see, often you end up with a bit more realistic P&Ls when you are observing your quote sheet. Okay. Mark and Jeff, I never said hi to you, my friends. I see you are with us as well. I was not looking at the chat box for a moment, and I missed you. So good to see you, my friends. What else? Okay, so you could insert rows. Okay, so you could come anywhere, like for example here where QQQ is, and you can right click and insert an empty row, and it will create a separation. To be honest, you can also use the insert button on your keyboard and it will do the same. So now I did it without right clicking, just by hitting the insert key on the keyboard. It's quite self-explanatory, to be honest. Okay, but again, inserting empty row, deleting empty row, clear the row, or clear all rows, these options do what you would think it does. So insert an empty row, you just saw what it is. Delete a row, it does what you just saw, it deletes the row. If instead of using right click delete, I position myself in the row I want to delete and I hit delete on the keyboard, so the row is deleted. It's the same. So insert or delete on the keyboard equals insert manually here or delete manually there. Okay. Now clear the row means that the information in the row will go away, but the row stays. For example, I am now selected with the QQQ. So if I clear row, okay, interesting. For whatever reason, it did not take it. Okay, now I'm not sure why it didn't before, and maybe I didn't click properly with my mouse. But anyway, so if you right click and clear row, so it will get rid of it. And if you select clear all rows, the moment you clear all rows, everything will go away, no matter in which row you are. So again, it's quite self-explanatory. And then symbol lookup or import symbols or export symbols, again, relatively self-explanatory. So when it comes to symbols, you can just come in here and type it. So MCD for McDonald's, that's it. Or you could right-click, symbol lookup. Okay, and now this window shows up, which is the same window that shows up if you are using a chart and you click on the maximizing glass. The same window will pop up, which is a window that allows you to look for symbols if you didn't know the symbol by heart. So you could maybe say, okay, I'm looking for something uh, uh, European, US, whatever that contains the word, meta. So when you click search, okay, or contains, you click search, and you're gonna see many companies, metal, and this could be the companies that you're looking for. Okay, so let's say you are looking for this one, CMC. So you would just select that, you double click, and then the symbol appears here. Okay, so again, it's just a search tool. Okay. Import symbols, okay, basically means that, let's say that your watch list, you have it somewhere which is saved in a file. For example, my very well known that I use all the time, penny increment options list. So if I was to double click on my list, now the whole set of symbols that are in that particular list will show up, okay, as I scroll down. By the way, to save, download, and increase the speed of use of the platform, notice how things are being loaded, what's called technically in a lazy manner, meaning that it's being loaded as is needed. It's not loaded by default because it will require more bandwidth. So only what's visible on the screen will be loaded. Everything else won't be loaded. Okay. Export a list, okay, as the name suggests, helps you to basically now click a name, and when you click save, so another file, just like the penny increment options I have here, so a different file would be created with that particular list. Okay, so I believe we went over everything when it comes to the functionality of the quote window. The last thing I wanted to say is that apart from what you see, okay, and what you can do, as I kind of demonstrated, I think I demonstrated basically everything, and definitely everything which is relevant, and almost every single functionality, I guess. So the one thing that I have not demonstrated yet is the fact that, and this depends on the symbols that you click, okay, but the fact that you can also right click, okay, and if you selected a symbol, which is something tradable, etc. So then now you also have here additional possibilities for your right click, which is open a chart with that symbol in it, open an option chain with that symbol in it, open a spread select window with that symbol in it, open a risk graph, an options queue, a group rotation, a decay, or a projection tool with the symbol in it. Okay, so those can be. Now, of course, if you open a projection tool and the stock is American Airlines, so okay, here we go, you have it here, but basically it's gonna give you by default long call, not because you're long, but just because this happens to be the first strategy on the top of the list of all the strategies. When first option strategy here on the top, apart from long and short stock. So that's why. Okay, but basically that is really only useful if you are in some sort of a trade, because now you can evaluate this trade much better. Okay, if you only use the quote sheet for watch list purposes, meaning that you use this list for you to click and the charts to change automatically without having to type the symbol, then all those additional functionalities that show up here, really they're not very useful, because they open kind of like a virgin space for you to work with, where you have to analyze everything from zero, which probably, if you wanted to open an option chain on American Airlines, I would say probably the most natural or intuitive way to do it is to open the option chain and then change this to American Airlines, instead of go find the symbol you want from a list and right click to open an option chain. Probably it's more steps. Okay, even though it's doable. When that functionality becomes very useful, and you see us do that all the time. Let me open a new portfolio. You see us do that all the time in our live trading sessions, is when you put here options data instead of just the name of a stock, for example, Microsoft, right? Instead, so let's say you got into a trade with Microsoft, right? So let's say you open a chart with Microsoft, you decided Microsoft was going to come here, and you created an option strategy, and I'm just doing this at the speed of the light. Please ignore me for a moment here as I'm doing this. And then you copied, you took a specific trade with Microsoft, with options, a spread, and then you came here and you pasted the spread by right click, paste, okay, or just Control V. And so what you have here now, okay, and if I expand the columns a little better, okay, if I expand this better, so what happens here now is that you have all this spread here, and now here it becomes very, very useful if you were to right click and, for example, call a risk graph from here. Because if you were to call the risk graph, okay, if you were to call the risk graph, as I said before, for example, if you wanted an option chain on Microsoft, probably the easy way to think about it would be that you open the option chain and then you type Microsoft, right? If you were to look at a spread on Microsoft and you were to think about, I want a risk graph with the spread, and you started with opening the spread tool, well, the spread tool opens with no spread in it. It starts with a long call, which is, again, the first strategy on the list. So you will need to come in here and manually edit the spread and add another leg and basically just construct the spread so you can then graph it. So when you put that on a quote sheet window, and the same happens with the positions window, it's very convenient because you can just right click from here. Even if I click only on one of the units in the middle, right? When I create a risk graph, it's gonna graph me the whole bull call spread. Notice that I got the 280 call and the 290 call here, which is the same thing I have in the background in my quote sheet window, 280 to 90 call. Okay, so in that sense, that functionality is there for a reason. It makes lots of sense to be there, but it's probably much more useful when you are using the quote sheet window for options purposes versus when you use the underlying symbol itself. Okay, so yeah, very good. So now, you before I comment on something important, let me bring in the positions window, and I'll put it on the side. I'm using a different size of the font. Okay, the one in the background, as you can see, quote sheet here on the upper. Okay, the one on the right is my positions window. You can see here my positions versus quote sheet, right? So the font of the font is the size of the font is obviously smaller, okay, but that's not relevant. Notice how the inside is very, very, very similar, okay, even though by default many of the columns are different. And the reason why is because typically, and by the way, you could certainly come in here and right click and be like, hey, I want the bid size. So okay, so let's find the bid size. The bid size is here, and I could add it, and now I have the column with the bid size, right? So you could certainly do that. Okay, I'm gonna remove it. Okay, you could certainly do that. Okay, not a problem. But um, typically the positions window is designed for you to add positions and therefore track the P&L of those trades that you're running. So in that sense, the columns that come by default, they are really paying more attention to the right side. And to be honest, that was a bad example with the bid size because it's here too, but basically you have less columns on the left and you are more focused on what's on the right, which is the P&L. Where when you're looking at the quote window, as you can see, you have open, high, low, last, net, volume. So all of these additional columns are more related or more convenient when the quote sheet window is being used as a tool for observation purposes. For example, the S&P open and you're observing, okay, so what's the volume that Microsoft is gaining today? And you are observing that in the quote window. That is kind of like the thinking behind the difference, because putting that on the side, functionality and everything is exactly the same. So you have tabs, you can add tabs, they're called portfolios, you can rename them. If you look at the menu, it's exactly the same, isn't it? So it's the same thing. So again, just think about the position window like a special quote window where normally you use it when you want to monitor P&Ls, where you normally use the quote sheet window as a tool that you normally use when you want to monitor other parameters, or to be used as a clickable watch list of a sort, to make your life easier when switching from chart to chart, from market to market, without having to type. Okay, this is kind of the philosophy behind those two tools. And then there is something absolutely critical, which I'm keeping for the last, now that these tools are explained, which is the fact that the my position window is being saved as an individual independent file in your top folder, where the quote sheet window is not being saved as an individual independent file. The quote sheet window is being saved as a window inside your page. Okay, and if you recall the very first ever lesson that we did on pages, okay, well, the first top session that we did was actually on the use of pages. So if you have not seen that, I recommend you to go back in time and watch it, because it's obviously extremely relevant. But basically that's the difference. Okay, so if I bring a file explorer, give me a moment and I will show you that, and I get into my directory. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is my directory. So notice how we have a mypositions.dev. Okay, this is the window. Okay, this is the window. So if I change anything in my positions window, okay, and I close, or the electricity goes away, I lose power, or I forget to save my page, or whatever that is, no problem. Okay, I save everything, I open the positions window, and everything is back to where it was, because it's being saved in an independent file. Now with the quote window, I just closed it. So if I open a new quote window, it's blank. It doesn't even remember the tabs. Okay, so the quote window, and by the way, if you go back to your directory with the Trading Options Planner, there is no myquote.def, because the myquote window is designed to be part of a page. So for example, let's say that, let me open a new page, for example. Okay, let's not save anything. Let's just open a new page. And let's say that you want to have a setup, which is, for example, you want, let me see, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let me do this. So I'm gonna tile horizontally. Okay, and let me do this one less. You'll see where I'm going. Yeah. Okay. Let me get rid of one. I will, depending on the resolution that you are utilizing on your computer, all those things change a lot. So let me do this. I'm just gonna move the quote sheet in front of the chart, and now I'm gonna go back to vertical. Here we go. So I got a quote window on the left, a quote window on the right. I got a chart in between. Okay. So you may do some adjustment. Maybe you want, because if you only want to use it for clickable purposes, maybe you make it yellow with the chart. Okay, and maybe what you have here is you have a list of symbols. I'm just gonna import symbols. Okay, these are your symbols, and because it's only for clickable purpose, maybe you keep it very small. And here is your chart. So as you go through the symbols, the chart will change. Okay, you go through the symbols and the chart will change. Okay, and maybe on the right, maybe you are monitoring only the ETFs. Again, just an improvised setup here. So you are monitoring the ETFs, and here, to be honest, there are many things that and you only care, for example, about things such as volume. So I'm gonna remove the last. Maybe you only care about these particular values. Okay, one moment. Almost there. Here we go. So for example, in this particular case, okay, you are looking at a symbol, you are looking at open, high, low, last volume. Maybe this is some information that you want to have in front of you when you're trading, which is not something that you want to use for clickable purposes. So because that code window is not linked, it doesn't matter if you click on it or not, it's not going to change the chart. Where the one on the left, which I linked earlier, as you remember, so if I click on it, it's going to change the chart. So the information on the right is for display purposes, where the information on the left is for clicking purposes to move around your charts more easily. And in that sense, those quote windows now, if I save this as a page, okay, if I save this as a page, test page, okay, so if I save it as a page, okay, so those quote windows are being saved. Again, if I open a new page and then I go back to open my test page, notice how those quote windows are in the place and the information contained inside is remembered. Okay, where if I open another quote window, even it doesn't matter if I am in this test page or I am outside that test page, if I open a new quote window, notice that the quote window will always be blank. Where if I open a position window, even though I am not in the page I was before, I am in the test page I just created, when I open the positions window, my positions are still there, because remember, the positions window saves what's inside in an independent separate file, because the purpose of it is to be more kind of like universal, if you wish, across the use of the platform, because those are positions that you're running and therefore there is PNL involved. Where with the quote windows, there is not necessarily PNL involved. Maybe you just have it there just for the convenience of clicking and changing charts as a watch list. Okay. So again, these are two very different tools, but at the same time, depending on how you set it up inside your tab and the distribution of the windows, the location that what you're trying to do for a usage point of view. So really, in the end, while the look and feel of those tools is basically copy paste, then the functionality could be quite different. And it's important to understand those details so you can use it efficiently and certainly avoid the issue of saving many things on this particular sheet, and then you close it, and then you're like, oh, I want to recover it, and then you open a new quote window and it's empty, and it's like, what do I do now? Well, the only thing you could do at this point is reopen the page. Okay? Reopen the page file, and magic, your quote sheet is here again. Okay, so again, the quote sheet windows are objects that are being saved within the page, where the positions window is independent, is more universal, if you wish. Mark, so one could set up top with a page for trading futures. Yes, absolutely. You can have multiple pages, or maybe you look at that. So you have your list of stocks for you to trade. Okay, and I'm going to call these rename portfolio stocks. Okay, and then you create another list that we're going to call futures. Okay, and it's right there. And in this one, you're going to have your ES, YM, CL, etc. And now, next thing you know, you can click on those, and those will be futures markets loading on your screen. Okay, so you can also do that if you don't want to have to use multiple pages, even though probably you end up trading also different time frames. So I would say probably what makes the most sense is to use different pages. You may have a setup with different charts, different time frames, different watch lists for futures, and you save it as a page called futures, and you have a different kind of like a presentation of windows, kind of like set up on your screen with different watch lists as well for stocks and different time frames and different amount of charts, and you save it as my stocks or options page. Okay, so certainly that would be the way to do it. Okay, how is it going so far, guys? Please give me some feedback so I can hear from you and confirm and reconfirm that all is going well. Again, what I'm explaining to you there really it's just pure use of the software. It's not even related to trading. It's just basically the use of the software. It's quite simple, but at the same time, I'm a fan of understanding those subtlenesses very well, because it makes the use of the platform to be so much more efficient, and therefore how much you enjoy it, and how joyful your trading sessions become. To me that makes a big difference. Okay, so let me know if this is well understood with a quick message on the chat box, please. And also, guys, normally we run the sessions for a full 1 hour, but there is something going on my end. I have an issue I need to take care of basically immediately. So I was planning to next go for the option chain, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to keep that for the next session. I hope you don't mind, but again, there is an urgency happening here on my end, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to go. You may have heard some background noise a moment ago, so I am concerned of something. So I basically need to go. And feel very sorry about that, but I have to. Okay, it's all understood. Wonderful, guys. Thank you very much for joining me today. Yeah, nice, Mark, nice, Jeff, Joe, everyone. If you're watching this recorded, again, sorry for keeping the session 40-minute long today instead of full 1 hour. But anyway, we are now experts in the quote windows, and next time we're going to be focusing on the option chain. There is plenty of for us to discuss on the option chains. Looking forward to that. I would not have had time in 20 minutes anyway, so I think that maybe it's actually a good thing in a way that we have a full 1 hour to talk about the option chain. Very good, everybody. My friends, take care. See you soon. See you during the week in the trading sessions. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.